The United States, Canada, and Australia were once like three brothers. They fought together, they traded together, and they spied for each other. But today, one of those brothers just walked away from the table. Australia didn't just say no to Donald Trump's latest demands. They didn't just ignore his threats. They did something much more dangerous. They picked up the phone and called Mark Carney. And they didn't just call him for a chat. They invited the Canadian Prime Minister to address their parliament, an honor usually reserved for the President of the United States. In the next few minutes, you are going to see exactly how this alliance shattered overnight, why Donald Trump is suddenly the loneliest leader on the world stage, and why this single move by Australia could hit your wallet hard if you're holding US dollars. This is not routine diplomacy. This is a global realignment, and it is happening in real time. Before we get into this, think about something. If your closest friend kept threatening you, kept demanding total loyalty while handing you nothing but chaos, how long before you stopped answering the phone? Hold that thought. It is going to matter. Early this morning, the Australian Prime Minister's office released a statement that caught Washington completely off guard. Mark Carney will be traveling to Australia next week to deliver a historic joint address to their parliament. You need to understand what that means in diplomatic language. You do not invite a foreign leader to speak to your government unless you are sending a seismic signal. Traditionally, the first call an Australian leader makes goes to Washington. The first state visit is a handshake in the Oval Office. Not this time. Australia looked at the chaos pouring out of the Trump White House, the tariff threats, the erratic posts, the demands for unconditional obedience, then looked at Mark Carney's calm, calculated leadership, and they made their choice. They chose the adult in the room. If you are an American watching this, that choice should worry you more than any tariff number. Remember AUKUS? That massive nuclear submarine deal between the US, the UK, and Australia was supposed to be the crown jewel of American influence in the Pacific. Trump has been threatening to put it on hold unless Australia pays more, using it as leverage, assuming he had them cornered. But read today's Australian press release. They did not mention the United States once. Not once. They talked about Commonwealth partnership. They talked about critical minerals. They talked about strategic alignment with Canada. That silence is deafening. Australia is telling the world it has a plan B, and that plan does not require permission from the Oval Office. If Trump kills the sub-deal, Canberra will not beg. They will pivot. Behind the scenes, the pressure campaign was frantic. Trump's team had been leaning hard on Canberra for weeks. They wanted Australia to back the trade war against Canada. They wanted a united front to force Carney into submission. Diplomats were making panic calls right up until the announcement, begging them not to invite Carney, to wait until the trade deal was settled, and to not embarrass the president. Australia ignored every one of those calls. They sent the invite anyway. That is the ultimate receipt. When your closest ally stops listening, you do not have an alliance. You have an illusion. Here is where it gets personal for anyone watching their portfolio. Since the rumor of Carney's visit leaked, the Australian dollar actually rallied against the US greenback. Markets hate uncertainty, and Trump is pure chaos while Carney is pure stability. Investors are betting that a Canada-Australia resource bloc controlling massive reserves of the world's uranium, lithium, and gold is a safer bet than a volatile American market driven by midnight social media posts. The money is literally moving away from Trump's volatility and toward Carney's credibility. That is a receipt you cannot fake. If you are not watching commodity currencies right now, you are missing the early tremors of something much larger. You do not have to guess whether this stung the White House. Just 2 hours after the announcement, Trump took to his platform. There were no congratulations. There was no mention of friendship. He posted a rant about freeloading Australians and dishonest Canadians. He called the Australian Prime Minister weak. He threatened to review all military cooperation. That is not the reaction of a man in control. That is the reaction of a man who just realized the room went quiet because everyone left. When the President of the United States resorts to name-calling against his closest allies, it means one thing. He has lost the leverage to stop them. The fear is gone. And once fear evaporates, so does his power. So why is this happening? Why is the most powerful leader on earth watching his friends walk away? Because Trump is trapped in an outdated playbook. He sees the world as a series of one-on-one real estate negotiations. Bully Canada today, Bully Australia tomorrow, bully Europe next week, and assume none of them will compare notes. He thinks he is the hub of the wheel and everyone else is just a spoke. But here's what he forgot. Spokes can connect to each other. Trump's entire strategy relies on keeping his targets isolated and afraid. The moment he pushes too hard, they stop being afraid and start looking for alternatives. That is precisely what just happened on the other side of the Pacific. Look at the pattern because it is unmistakable. Trump escalated tariffs on Canadian steel. He expected Canada to fold. Instead, Carney called Europe. Trump threatened to pull security guarantees from NATO. He expected them to pay up. Instead, they started building independent defense pacts. Now Trump threatened Australia's trade access. He expected them to beg. Instead, they called Carney. Every single time Trump swings the stick, he does not get obedience. He gets fragmentation. He is literally driving his allies into each other's arms, assembling the very coalition he fears most, a network of countries that do not need him. That is not a show of strength. That is self-destruction on an installment plan. There is a difference between being tough and being powerful that too many people miss. Toughness is noise. Power is having people pick up the phone when you call. Right now, nobody wants to take Trump's call because they know what is on the other end: threats, demands, and instability. Meanwhile, they look at Ottawa and see composure. They see a prime minister who understands global finance better than anyone in the current U.S. administration. They see a partner who keeps his word. In high-stakes geopolitics, you can be tough or you can be reliable. You cannot be a volatile bully. That is too much risk for any nation to carry. Australia did the math. The risk of angering Trump was high. The risk of depending on him was higher. If this is clicking for you, if you are starting to see the pattern that the mainstream outlets refuse to name, hit subscribe right now. We break down these shifts before they hit the headlines, and the next chapter of this story is going to be even bigger. My friend told me I wouldn't get subscribers by telling these truths, but I know this community is smarter than that. Let's prove them wrong together. Drop your take in the comments, because what happens next depends on how people like you push this conversation forward. Most leaders, when attacked by a U.S. president, get defensive. They wave the flag, deliver fiery speeches, try to look tough for the cameras. Carney did none of that. He did not launch a social media war. He did not issue empty threats. He went to work. Quietly, methodically, he began calling capitals that share Canada's frustration with Washington. Carney understands something fundamental about the modern world. Power is no longer just about who has the biggest aircraft carriers. It is about who controls the flow of critical resources and who writes the rules of trade. While Trump obsesses over tariffs, a 19th century weapon, Carney is building a 21st century network. That gap in strategic thinking is everything. Here is the part that should keep Washington up at night. Canada and Australia together control a staggering share of the world's uranium, potash, lithium, and rare earth minerals. These are the materials you need for phones, for missiles, for electric vehicles, for the entire architecture of the future. By aligning with Australia, Carney is constructing a resource superpower block. He is telling the global market that if you want the raw materials to build tomorrow, you come to this table, and Washington does not get to set the price. This is the middle power strategy, uniting nations too large to be bullied but too small to dominate alone, then knitting them into a force that even the United States has to respect. It is quiet, it is complex, and it is devastatingly effective. The contrast in leadership style tells you everything. Trump demands loyalty. Carney offers value. Trump wants vassals. Carney wants partners. Trump tears up contracts. Carney builds systems. That is exactly why Australia sent the invitation, not because they love Canada, but because they trust Carney's competence more than they trust Trump's chaos. This visit is not a victory lap. It is a working session. They will sit down and begin designing a trade architecture that routes around the dysfunction in Washington. They are future-proofing their economies, and that is the most devastating blow you can deliver to a narcissist. You do not fight him. You simply make him irrelevant. So what does this mean for your daily life? For decades, the American dollar and the American handshake were the gold standard of global commerce. That stability kept prices down, supply chains humming, and the world rolling out the red carpet for American business. But when nations like Australia and Canada, countries that look like us, speak like us, and have bled beside us, decide to work around the United States, that system starts cracking. If they begin trading critical minerals in their own currencies or writing standards that ignore American input, the cost of doing business inside this country climbs. Think about the electronics, the batteries, the fertilizer behind the food on your table. Uncertainty is a hidden tax. Trump just raised it on every single one of us. There is one image from this morning that captures this entire story. On one side, Donald Trump at a rally in Ohio, red-faced, shouting about traders and tariffs to a crowd that looked angry and exhausted. On the other, a quiet video feed from Canberra, a handshake between the Australian High Commissioner and the Canadian envoy. No shouting, no banners, just two professionals in suits signing a document and getting back to work. One side is noise, the other is action. Carney did not have to raise his voice to be heard across the Pacific. He just had to be sane. In this political climate, sanity is a revolutionary act. Where does this go from here? 3 scenarios are in play. The most likely path is the simplest. Trump lashes out. He slaps punitive tariffs on Australian wine or beef, posts something insulting, tries to punish the betrayal. But Australia has already priced that in. If he hits them, it only pushes them deeper into Carney's coalition and accelerates the very realignment he is trying to prevent. Every retaliatory punch lands on his own credibility. The second scenario is the one that genuinely terrifies the White House, the domino effect. The United Kingdom is watching this closely. New Zealand is watching. Japan is watching. If Carney's visit produces a signed resource agreement, London could extend the next invitation. Picture the entire British Commonwealth uniting economically to shield itself from American instability, a global safety net that formally excludes Washington. That is not a thought experiment. That is a live possibility sitting on the table today. The third scenario is the one nobody wants to say out loud. Trump decides to weaponize the military alliance itself. He threatens to pull intelligence sharing. He threatens to ground joint fighter jet programs. He tears the Five Eyes apart. That would blind American intelligence agencies across the Pacific and leave the country strategically deaf, all to satisfy one man's ego. You would normally say no president would be that reckless. But Normal left the building a long time ago, and there are no more guardrails. Canada and Australia have decided they cannot wait for America to come back to its senses. They are moving on. Not because they want to, because they feel they have to. These are nations that stormed beaches alongside American soldiers, shared their most classified intelligence without hesitation. And now they are building a future without Washington at the center. The frightening part is not that they are leaving. The frightening part is that they might never need to come back. Once new trade routes are built and new resource deals are signed, you do not tear that up just because the next president seems reasonable. Those systems take on a life of their own. That is the trap Trump does not see. This is not a tantrum. This is infrastructure. You will look back at this week as the moment the Anglosphere stopped revolving around Washington. Carney is flying to Canberra carrying proposals, not grievances. Spreadsheets, not slogans. And Trump is left staring at the walls, wondering why his threats stopped working. He will blame everyone but himself. But none of it changes the fact that his closest allies stopped asking permission. So ask yourself one honest question. Did Mark Carney dismantle American influence, or did Donald Trump do that all by himself? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you want to see what happens when Carney lands in Canberra and how Trump retaliates, hit subscribe. We have a goal to reach and a story worth sharing. This story is far from over. This content is commentary and opinion, not professional financial, legal, or geopolitical advice. Consult a qualified expert before making any decisions based on what you have heard here.